It's a worst fear come true. The worst fear of homeless advocates and homeless people. Dying alone, freezing cold on the streets after being denied a warm bed.
He was on every wait list possible.
It happened to a man in Bend named Dave on Tuesday.
It's really tough to leave him there and not have a solution for him.
Hard to believe, really. I'm Dan Haggerty. Thanks for being with us. Welcome to The Story. So you know what to do. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook or Instagram. Use Twitter and the hashtag HeyDan to talk to us. And also, why don't you take a quick peek out your window? It's dark already, thank you to daylight saving time. On your way home from work, maybe you notice that it's getting pretty cold outside. I think Matt said the low was like 37 or something today in Portland. Winter actually doesn't technically start for another month or so. We already have winter storm warnings in the Cascades, though. Lots of snow falling in the mountains. I know a lot of you have already turned on the heat in your homes, especially overnight. It's been getting really chilly. And I know this isn't going to be an ordinary winter. I mean, COVID is here, right? It's expected to get worse. More of us are kind of living our lives indoors in those more COVID risky environments. Restaurants, they're already on the brink of failure and collapse, and may get even closer to that failure since they won't be able to seat as many people outside when it gets really cold and temps are freezing. And I'm sure you understand it's hard to have a comfortable dinner when the wind is blowing on a 30-degree night. Now, imagine living in that weather. It's impossible to miss the growing number of people living on our streets in these frigid temperatures. And after yesterday in Bend, dying in our streets for that very reason. And that brings us to our big story. It really is just a horrific story. It's almost difficult to talk about, but considering the magnitude of our homeless crisis, I think it is even more important than ever to acknowledge what thousands of our neighbors face every single night while most of us are sitting warm in our beds. See, on Tuesday, a man named Dave died on a sidewalk in Bend. He was homeless. He was a double amputee, and he couldn't get into a shelter. I mean, even though he tried. Now, homeless advocates are worried what happened to Dave will happen again, and in more places. Here's Maggie Vespa.
The morning that I got news of his passing, I cried. We were trying to get him the help that he needed, and it was just too late.
A man died sleeping on a cold sidewalk this week. It happened in Bend, and people there are heartbroken. Many knew Dave and had tried to help. Melody Horner started this GoFundMe page to pay for a hotel room, but she says local hotels wouldn't take him because he didn't have an ID.
It was really tough to leave him there and not have a solution for him.
Dave, a double amputee, was found dead on Tuesday. The cold, windy weather, apparently a key factor. Ask advocates in Bend how this could happen, and they're pretty blunt.
There's limited resources. There's limited bed availability. He was on every wait list possible.
The dire problem of limited resources is one plaguing several communities, including the Portland area. Multnomah County in particular has always touted having enough beds for the area's homeless when severe weather hits. But the pandemic has brought their normally reliable system crumbling to the ground. Cramming people into crowded rooms is no longer an option. And amid historic unemployment, the rate of homelessness appears to be rising.
Because of COVID-19, we cannot guarantee that everyone who needs it will have a shelter on the worst nights of the year.
Late last month, officials sounded an unprecedented alarm, begging the public for, quote, any large open space.
A gymnasium, a cafeteria, a large meeting hall, a ballroom.
And this week, the Columbian reported officials in Clark County are in the same boat, searching for enough severe weather shelter spaces to house everyone living on the streets in and around Vancouver. All the while, temperatures are dropping. And Tuesday, officials' worst fears were realized in Bend with the story of a man dying while he waited for a shelter bed. Thursday, I called the spokesperson for the Joint Office of Homeless Services in Multnomah County.
So we heard Chair Kafoury's pleas and the mayor's pleas and looking for public space. So what is the update?
So there's been a lot of good conversations with some of our public institutions, and we've actually had several dozen leads come through for buildings. So what we're doing now is folks are looking at those. Do they actually fit the criteria that we have set out? Where are they located? Who owns them? What does that look like? And site visits are happening.
Dennis Therault said Portlanders should expect news on that front soon. In Clark County, officials said they're working to find more space too, leaning on churches and motel vouchers as much as possible. Still,
on a cold night, do you think that there will be people that are still in need of shelter who can't get it?
Probably.
all right, a couple of resources here for people who want to help. In Multnomah County, to donate items, either in person or just buy them online via an Amazon shopping list, you can head to 211info.org/donations. In Clark County, to donate warm clothing, sleeping bags, socks, and so on, you can visit the Council for the Homeless Housing Solutions Center. That address is there on Andreessen Road. You can drop things off 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And Dan, per usual, we'll have all that info at kgw.com for people.
You know, just for a second, speaking of helping, so many people, we got tons of feedback after your story yesterday. A lot of people were moved by that. It was Veterans Day, of course, and you focused on homeless veterans. And I want to read one of the tweets that we got. A viewer wrote, "This story broke my heart. I guess many average folks like me are wondering how to help." So do you have any advice for people who are wondering that same thing right now?
I know, that tweet was just wonderful to see. Yes, 100%. And you might have seen Transition Projects, the group that we were following yesterday, actually responded to that viewer on Twitter. It was awesome. And they responded with this website. It's tprojects.org, like Transition Projects, tprojects.org. That's where you can go also to donate items, to volunteer, to help those veterans. I should point out, it's also where you can go to sign up to help run local shelters this winter. The county told me they're desperately in need of more volunteers to help run those shelters as well. And then, Dan, I also want to point out, we also got an email from one of our viewers asking about one of the veterans in our piece in particular last night, Kurt, the Army veteran. You might remember in our piece, he told us that his support dog had passed away this year, and one of our viewers wanted to know if she could help get him a new dog. That was one of the sweetest things I'd ever seen come into our email, and I wrote her back, and I just want to tell everybody, in case they're also wondering, I asked Kurt about getting a new dog, and he said he's just not emotionally there yet. He's not sure if he's ever going to get one, but at least definitely not right now. But, you know, you and I know this. Our viewers are incredible, and that email was just further proof of it. So thank you to all of our viewers who watched and wrote in last night. That was so sweet.
I was thinking the exact same thing. Maggie, thank you. Now, of the many people who are homeless in Multnomah County, nearly 500 of them are also veterans. And even veterans who aren't homeless, of course, require care that those of us who've never served maybe don't understand and certainly don't need. This week, I had a chance to talk with Cynthia Vitale from Lines for Life. They're a service dedicated to preventing suicide. And Cynthia explained the unique challenges that veterans face when they're struggling. What kind of separates, though, people in the military and veterans from the rest of the people experiencing some form of PTSD?
Yeah, you're correct. I think there's a lot of people that experience post-traumatic stress. And I think when we add the D, when we consider it a disorder, is when it has disordered our lives in a way that it's making it difficult to function. And so for veterans, you know, they've had to rebuild their internal system to do the work that they do. The work that they do is hard. It's a lot of trouble. It's contact with difficult people. They're gearing themselves up for war. They're in war. They've experienced war. And so that is an abnormal thing for most people. We don't all have to deal with that. And then to return home to a civilian life is a complete 180. And so for folks that have to adapt to that, that's the abnormal circumstances. And so we experience, a lot of us even this year are experiencing a ton of post-traumatic stress. And then it gets to be a disordered state when it's making it impossible for us to function in our lives. And the thing that I think that veterans really struggle with is the hurdle of the stigma of that. The culture is to be tough and to not talk and to deal with it and to get over it and to move on and to do the job. And your body is trying to regulate what's happened to you over the course of your service. And being tough is contrary to being able to let that heal.
Now, KGW has partnered with Lines for Life several different times in the past. They do amazing work, and they don't just work with veterans, of course. They work with everybody, anybody who is out there struggling. And maybe you know somebody right now who is. Maybe you are. They're available 24/7. The number is on the screen right now. They are really amazing, amazing people. Call them, 1-800 273-8255. All right. So imagine having more than 13,000 bosses and nearly 70% of them want you to be fired. It's tough. It can't be a good feeling. It's probably how Oregon City Mayor Dan Holliday feels this week, because on Tuesday, more than 9,000 people in Oregon City voted to recall the mayor. He'll be temporarily replaced by Oregon City Commission President Rachel Smith, who you see here, and she's going to be holding down the fort until voters replace Holliday during a special election in March, because election season is forever nowadays. But voters in Oregon City didn't have one reason for wanting to get rid of their mayor. They had two.
Oregon City Mayor Dan Holliday is officially recalled, but he's been stirring up headlines and controversy for a while now. So how did we get here? Holliday was elected mayor in 2015 and then re-elected in 2019, but he hasn't gotten much outside attention until this year. In April, when the state shut down because of the pandemic, Holliday considered issuing a declaration to reopen businesses in his city. The state attorney general was not happy about that and threatened civil or criminal action until he backed off. Oregon City commissioners issued a statement saying that they never considered reopening against the governor's orders and that the mayor did not speak for them. Holliday backed down too, but he claimed he just changed his mind and said he did nothing wrong. Then in June, in the thick of the George Floyd protests, Holliday got some backlash for social media posts he made. One downplayed police brutality against black people, calling it, quote, hardly an epidemic. In another, he asked why there could be protests, riots, looting, and vandalism in Portland, but no 4th of July fireworks in smaller towns. When commissioners held an emergency meeting about his comments, he walked out.
Are you leaving?
I am.
So you're not interested in what the rest of us have to say?
I'll hear what the rest of you have to say on the recording.
A group started circulating a recall petition, and they were able to get enough signatures. Holliday had refused to resign, so voters made the decision for him and recalled him on Tuesday. And that's how we got here.
When I heard all this, I had some questions. You might too. The first one I had about this recall, well, when was the last time that something like this happened in Oregon? The most recent example we could find happened in 2008. If you want to see how much our society has changed since then, wait until you hear this story. So in 2008, voters in Arlington, Oregon recalled Mayor Carmen Contour-Gronquist, the first woman to be elected mayor there in Arlington. So you got to wonder, what transgression was so serious that more than half of the voters decided that she needed to be gone? Get her out of there. Well, how about old photos of her in her underwear surfacing on MySpace? No, that's not a typo. I actually meant to say MySpace. Now, at the time, Contour-Gronquist said that the whole thing was a big nothing burger, saying, I took this office and those photos have nothing to do with me and my abilities to be mayor. I mean, honestly. Think about the people running for office now. Do you think that scandal would gather much steam nowadays? Have you been on Instagram? So not only have the gender politics of that story become a little outdated, so is the technology, though I do stand by MySpace. In the end, the vote was much tighter than the one we saw with the Holliday recall. For that one, it was 142 to recall, 139 against.
When the story continues, drones over St. John's shot down.
So there was huge community opposition to this.
Figuratively shot down, that is. Why the community wasn't too keen on having a drone test site built right next door. And when we told you about 2 counties backing Greater Idaho, a lot of you had the same question, like, what does Idaho have to say about it?
It would give Idaho beachfront property, so I'm down with that.
Hadn't really thought of that.
Hey, welcome back to The Story. Thanks to everyone for joining us in the online conversation. Grab your phone, use the hashtag HeyDan. Lots of people weighing in on the story Maggie did about the man who died on the streets in Bend and everything else that we are expecting to happen this winter. So keep telling us what you're thinking. A lot of people asking ways that they can help, and we'll continue to answer those questions the best we can. Now, this next story, I can tell you, checks a whole lot of boxes. The environment, telecommunication companies, privacy, and of course, drones. Keely Chalmers explains why neighbors in St. John's prevented a drone testing facility from going up and buzzing around in their backyard, sending them to go look for other backyards, maybe yours.
This is the piece of land that was at the center of the drone debate, a 6.5-acre plot along the Willamette River just north of the St. John's Bridge. It's owned by the Port of Portland and has sat vacant for 13 years, the port looking to lease it.
Our goal is to bring in businesses that help provide jobs to the community and help boost our economy.
So when an opportunity to lease it to a Verizon subsidiary with headquarters in Portland popped up, the port started negotiations. The company was called Skyward. It was actually founded in 2012 at the University of Oregon. It wanted to use the land and the river to test drones for commercial use. Things like power line inspections, natural disaster response, and wildfire prevention.
So there was huge community opposition to this.
But the idea of drones buzzing up and down the Willamette, not far from the St. John's neighborhood, didn't fly with many.
You know, having drones buzzing up and down the river day after day after day on a repetitive basis really undermines those efforts that have been ongoing for decades to recover this river.
Bob Salinger, director of conservation with Portland Audubon, says the community was concerned about privacy issues, noise, and the wildlife in the area.
If we have a pair of nesting peregrines on the St. John's Bridge, that would be very vulnerable to colliding with those drones.
The port listened.
We do value the community input, and we listen to the
and earlier this month canceled the plans. So for now, the riverfront property will continue to sit vacant. But don't be surprised if you see and hear some drones flying somewhere else in Portland. On its website, Skyward states that it has since discovered other locations that would provide more immediate use. Sites that would allow the company to more quickly advance commercial drone operations and bring high-quality tech jobs to the Portland area. As for where those sites might be, the company did not respond.
Okay, Keely Chalmers joining us now, and I'm curious about the next community that encounters this issue, and I'm wondering how big of a role privacy plays into all of this. And maybe I would feel differently if they were wanting to do this next to where I live, but in a world where we are tracked by pretty much everything we have, from our cars to our cell phones, how much of a role does privacy play in whether or not this company can operate?
Well, I think, this story was about this community that didn't want these drones in their neighborhood or flying near their neighborhood. And obviously, as I mentioned in the story, privacy was one of the big deals. I mean, they didn't want to necessarily see a drone passing by their window when they're getting up and having a cup of coffee in the morning. Not that that was going to happen, but I think there's just a lot of questions out there they were concerned about. They didn't want to see drones outside their windows. I mentioned that they didn't want to see drones flying along this stretch of the Willamette River that was a Superfund site, is a Superfund site. There's been a lot of restoration work that's gone into this stretch, and they thought this drone testing facility was not right for this location. Of course, I also mentioned the wildlife. That was also another big concern. So it's not that people don't like drones. I mean, we need drones. They play a key purpose in so many things. But I think these neighbors just thought this place at this time is just not a good deal.
Got it. Keely Chalmers, thank you.
You bet.
All right. I want to talk about the presidential election for a minute. Relax. Sit back in your chair. You're up on the edge right now. I don't want to talk about the transition or President Trump refusing to concede. Nothing like that. Nothing you've heard on nightly news. I want to talk about how Clallam County in Washington voted, because they just became the only county in the entire country to correctly pick the winner of each presidential election of the past 40 years. Now, if you're not from Washington, or you're really not up on your geography, or if you're wondering, does Clallam County have too many L's in its name jammed too closely together? This right here is where it is. It's in the very northwest corner of the state. That's where the town of Forks is located. For any Twilight fans out there, that dude's about to be Batman. Can you believe that? It's crazy. It's pretty purple, though, that county. And if you look at their voting record, you can see why. See, they picked Ronald Reagan over Walter Mondale in 1980 and 84. In 1988, they just barely stayed red. George H.W. Bush got just 77 more votes than Michael Dukakis. Then in the 90s, they went blue for Bill Clinton. They went back to red again for George W. Bush in 2000 and 2004. Then they went blue again for Barack Obama in 08 and 2012. Then 4 years ago, Donald Trump won the county by a little over 3 points. And last week, voters there picked Joe Biden by 5.5 points. Now, up until this most recent election, there were 18 other counties across the nation with the same kind of track record, the perfect presidential picks, the voting records going back until 1980. But they all voted for President Trump, leaving Clallam County the only one left. I'm betting the national media is probably going to have their eye on them in 2024. Now, in Oregon, Tillamook County held a record of correctly picking presidents going back to 1992. So not quite as long as Clallam County, but still pretty impressive, though last week that streak ended. Tillamook County voters chose President Trump over Biden, just by 350 votes. So it was close, but the streak ends. Its neighbors, though, we should mention, on the coast, Clatsop and Lincoln counties, they both went for Biden, showing that that region is a pretty purple area. Now, we're talking about geography. Do you remember this? This is that proposed map for Greater Idaho. It's that movement to expand Idaho into eastern and southern Oregon, a bit of northern California, too. It was started by a group of people here that feel that they're more aligned with Idaho's conservative politics than what we have going on here in Oregon. We talked about it a little earlier this week on the story. If you want to check that out, it's on the KGW YouTube channel right now. Basically, the gist of it is 4 Oregon counties actually had ballot measures that would require their commissioners to talk about this idea of joining Idaho, and 2 counties actually passed it, Union and Jefferson. Now, to be clear, we are really like light years away from any border changes. It would require legislative and then congressional approval to do this. But we did get a lot of feedback about this story. Diane says, "Hey, Dan, I live in Jefferson County and I voted yes on Measure 31. Not because I want to be part of Idaho, but so that Jefferson County could be at the table if the discussion came up. I'm sick of Portland making decisions for the majority of our state." Eileen seems like she's maybe a little on board with this too, for different reasons. She says, "Hey, Dan, about Eastern Oregon counties becoming part of Idaho, I say, let them go." Arlene brought up a pretty interesting point, though, with this email. What does Idaho think about the Greater Idaho idea? Yeah, do they actually want to absorb 3/4 of Oregon? It's a pretty interesting question. So we asked it to Brian Holmes, an anchor at our sister station in Boise, what people think there about this idea in his state.
When we've done the story in the past, we've had reaction from viewers and from people that we've spoken to, and they'd be like, great, the more the merrier. You want to be more conservative? Come on into Idaho. That's great. A lot of people in Idaho are like, well, we don't like what's going on our border counties anyway. We'll take you in and we'll kind of get rid of all that stuff. So it'll be, less on our doorstep than it was before. So the reaction, I think, from locals and even the governor is cool. We can understand why. We would love to have more like us. Come on in. You want to be in a more conservative state? You don't feel like you're getting represented from a rural perspective, from a farming perspective? Well, we'll do that for you and bring it on in. And that's kind of been the perspective of anybody that wants. It's kind of like that, oh, you want to move to Idaho? Cool. We'll take you because we could always use that base revenue, the tax revenue, and we always like the increasing population because that does well for the economy or whatever, and the ideological stance of the state. However, now we're kind of like tight on space, so they're like, well, yeah, we can expand into Eastern Oregon too. Why not?
Idaho's down. What? I didn't see that coming. Oregon suddenly is like, you guys got a sales tax? What's the deal with that sales tax? Can we debate that? Hey, we're going to do some comments after the break. Let me hear them. Use that hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. We're going to finish the story next. All right, first we got Greg writing in and saying, you got it backwards. We were talking about it getting dark thanks to daylight savings time. It's dark thanks to standard time. DTS gives you those sunny summer evenings. I guess, man, I'm just trying to not say daylight savings time. But technically, he's right. I do want to say on a more serious note, it really makes me feel good to know how good the people are at home who watch this show. We have been getting this outpouring of support for the stories we're doing on the homeless people and the needs that they have in this community. And tonight, Maggie's piece off the top was so difficult to really even watch when you think about what that man had to suffer through and what others may have to suffer through. We have resources. There are resources that you can contribute to. We have an email that we can put up right at the bottom of your screen there. Okay, that's for the Joint Office of Homeless Services. So if you are looking for ways to help or you want to offer some support, send them an email, reach out to them, and I'm sure they can help you out. But it really makes me feel good. When we first started doing this show, there's this thought that the news has to be coming at you real hard with all these graphics and flashy this, that, and the other thing. And we wanted to just say, no, our viewers would watch a story like this where we're just talking about real people and the things that they are really suffering through. And you've showed us that we were right in trusting you in that way. So thank you so much for all of that support. And that's the story for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.